What happens when a former royal sits down for what should be a routine celebrity interview, only to have the host push every single button until the whole thing explodes on live television? Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment, because this story gets absolutely wild. The studio lights were blazing hot as Meghan Markle adjusted her cream-colored blazer, the fabric already beginning to stick uncomfortably to her skin. She had agreed to appear on Andy Cohen's late-night talk show as part of her media tour, expecting the usual softball questions about her latest charitable endeavors and maybe some light banter about life in California. What she didn't expect was Andy's opening salvo. Regarding privacy, you've been quite vocal about wanting privacy for your family. Help me understand how that works exactly. Meghan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She had been media trained to handle questions like this, but something in Andy's tone immediately put her on edge. Well, Andy, I think there's a difference between choosing when and how to share your story versus having it constantly dissected and often misrepresented by others. Misrepresented? Andy repeated, tapping his index finger against his coffee mug. That's interesting. The Oprah interview, your podcast, the documentary. At what point does it stop being about setting records straight and start being about, well, staying relevant? The studio audience fell silent. This wasn't the playful ribbing they had expected. Meghan's publicist, watching from the wings, shifted. Nervously, I'm sorry, are you suggesting that speaking about my experiences is somehow calculated for relevance? Meghan's voice remained controlled, but her posture had straightened, her media training kicking in to manage what was clearly becoming a hostile interview. I'm not suggesting anything, Andy replied with a shrug that was anything but casual. Seems to revolve entirely around your brief time as a working royal and your subsequent departure. At what point do you move on from that narrative? My brand. Meghan's laugh was sharp, cutting through the studio air like a blade. Andy, I think you might be confusing me with someone else. I'm an advocate, a mother, a wife. I work with multiple charities. I've produced content that highlights important social issues, all of which prominently features your royal connections. And your departure story, Andy interrupted smoothly. When does Meghan Markle, the person separate from Meghan Markle, the former royal, with grievances, the high road? But something about Andy's casual dismissal of her work, his reduction of her entire post-royal life to grievance theater, struck a nerve she hadn't expected to be hit. Grievances, she repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. Is that what you call speaking about racism? About mental health struggles? About the pressures that drove me to contemplate suicide? I call it a narrative that's been monetized pretty effectively, Andy shot back without missing a beat. The studio audience was now completely silent, sensing that they were witnessing something far beyond typical late-night television banter. You know what Andy McGann said? Her voice still controlled, but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. I came here thinking we'd have a conversation about the work I'm actually doing now, the Archewell Foundation, our initiatives on digital wellness, maternal health, disaster relief, because that's what it looks like from the outside. Every project, every initiative, every interview comes back to the same story. The royal family mistreated you. You were the victim of racism. You couldn't get help when you needed it. Meghan's hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, now gripped the arms of her chair. Are you seriously questioning the validity of my experiences right now? I'm questioning the endless repetition of them, Andy clarified. Look, everyone sympathized with what you went through. The Oprah interview was watched by millions. People were outraged on your behalf, but that was years ago now. What's the next chapter? Meghan replied, her voice rising slightly for the first time. But apparently you're more interested in relitigating the past than discussing the present. I'm interested in understanding why the past keeps being brought up by you in every single forum you appear in, Andy countered. Even tonight, within the first 5 minutes, you've already referenced the media treatment, the lack of support, the misrepresentation. That comment hit like a slap across the face. Meghan's composed facade cracked visibly, her eyes flashing with something that went far beyond media-trained politeness. A greatest hits album, she repeated, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone. You think talking about experiencing racism and suicidal ideation is entertainment for you? Andy seemed to realize he had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. I think constantly referencing those experiences in every public appearance starts to feel performative after a while. People want to know what you're doing now, not what happened to you then. What I'm doing now, Meghan's voice was climbing again. I'm trying to create positive change in the world, while people like you insist on dragging me back into the very drama I'm trying to move beyond. Do you see the irony in that, Andy? The irony I see, Andy replied, his own voice sharpening, is someone who claims to want privacy while sitting in television studios. Someone who says they want to move on while continuously bringing up the same grievances. You can't have it. Both ways. Grievances again, Meghan said, shaking her head in disbelief. Andy, let me ask you something. If you had experienced what I experienced, if you had been treated the way I was treated, if your mental health had suffered the way mine did, would you just smile and pretend it never happened? I'd probably talk about it once, maybe twice. And then I'd move on with my life, Andy shot back. I wouldn't build an entire public persona around it. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan stared at him for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was eerily calm. You know what, Andy? You're absolutely right about one thing. I can't have it both ways. So let me be very clear about something. I didn't choose to become a public figure because of what happened to me in the royal family. I became a public figure in spite of it. Every project I work on, every initiative I support, every time I speak publicly, it's because I believe I can make a difference. But you always come back to the royal story, Andy pressed. Always. Even right now, you're talking about what happened to you there because you keep bringing it up, Meghan exploded, finally losing her composure completely. I came here to talk about maternal health initiatives, and you spent the first 10 minutes of this interview asking me to justify my existence as anything other than a victim. You want to know why I keep talking about it? Because people like you won't let me talk about anything else. The studio audience was now visibly uncomfortable, some looking around nervously as if unsure whether they should be witnessing this confrontation. Andy, however, seemed energized by Meghan's outburst. Now we're getting somewhere, he said with satisfaction. This is the real Meghan Markle, not the polished media-trained version, but the person who's actually angry about how things went down. Of course I'm angry, Meghan snapped. I'm angry that I can't do an interview about charity work without someone questioning my motives. I'm angry that my every move is scrutinized and criticized. I'm angry that people think speaking about trauma is somehow a career strategy rather than an attempt to help others who might be going through similar experiences. But don't you see how that anger undermines everything else you're trying to do? Andy asked, leaning back with the satisfied air of someone who had successfully provoked the reaction they were looking for. When you get defensive like this, when you lose your temper, it makes people think maybe there was more to the original story than you let on. More to the story. Meghan's voice was incredulous now. What exactly are you implying, Andy? I'm not implying anything, Andy replied, smoothly. I'm just saying that when someone gets this worked up about questions they should have expected, it makes you wonder what really happened behind closed doors. The studio fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place. Meghan stared at Andy with an expression that could have melted steel. Are you seriously suggesting right now, on live television, that I lied about my experiences? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of a thunderclap. I'm suggesting that there are always two sides to every story, Andy replied, seemingly oblivious to the danger he was walking into. And we've only heard one side. Repeatedly, two sides, Meghan repeated slowly. You want to hear the other side? The side where a young woman was told to keep quiet about racist attacks in the media because it might make other people uncomfortable. The side where I was denied help for my mental health because it might reflect poorly on the institution. The side where I was essentially told that my well-being mattered less than protecting people who were leaking stories about me to those same racist media outlets. Now you're getting emotional again, Andy observed, with clinical detachment. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Every time someone asks reasonable questions, you fall back on the same talking points, the same emotional appeals. Emotional appeals. Meghan's voice cracked slightly. Andy, you're talking about the darkest period of my life like it's a marketing campaign. You're discussing my mental health crisis like it's a publicity strategy. How exactly would you like me to respond to that? I'd like you to respond like someone who's moved past it, Andy replied coldly. like someone who's genuinely focused on the future, rather than constantly relitigating the past. The past that you brought up, Meghan pointed out, her voice rising again, the past that you insisted we discuss, instead of the work I actually wanted to talk about. You created this conversation, Andy, and now you're criticizing me for participating in it. Andy shrugged, a gesture that was clearly calculated to infuriate her further. I asked legitimate questions that any journalist would ask. The fact that you can't handle them without losing your composure says more about you than it does about me. That was the breaking point. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward from the force of her movement. You know what, Andy? Meghan said, standing behind her chair like a barrier between them. You're absolutely right. I can't handle this. I can't handle sitting here while you systematically dismiss every traumatic experience I've shared as a publicity stunt. I can't handle being told that speaking about racism and mental health struggles is somehow manipulative. And I definitely can't handle being lectured about moving on by someone who clearly hasn't moved on from whatever personal issues make you think this kind of interview is acceptable. Andy's eyebrows shot up at that last comment. Personal issues. I'm observing you, Meghan replied sharply. I'm watching someone who seems to take genuine pleasure in trying to break down another human being on live television. What kind of person does that, Andy? What kind of person sits across from someone and tries to invalidate their trauma for entertainment? The kind of person who asks hard questions, Andy shot back. But for the first time, his voice carried a defensive edge. The kind of person who doesn't just accept whatever narrative someone wants to sell. Narrative I want to sell. Meghan's laugh was bitter, Andy. Do you think I wanted any of this? Do you think I wanted to become a global figure for controversy? Do you think I wanted my personal struggles broadcast to millions of people? Do you think any of this has been fun for me? I think you've profited from it considerably, Andy replied, but his usual smugness was wavering. Profited, Meghan repeated. Let me tell you about Profit Andy. I've lost friends. I've been estranged from family members. I've had to move to another continent. I receive death threats regularly. My children have to have security protection because of the hatred directed at me. If this is profit, I'd hate to see what you consider a loss. Andy opened his mouth to respond, but Meghan held up her hand. No, I'm talking now. You've had your turn to tear me down for the past 20 minutes. Now it's my turn. Her voice was steady now, controlled in a way that was somehow more intimidating than her earlier anger. You want to know what really bothers me about this interview? It's not the questions themselves. I've answered these questions dozens of times for people who actually wanted to understand. It's the glee in your voice when you ask them. It's the satisfaction you clearly get from watching me get upset. I'm just doing my job, Andy said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Your job is to interview people, not to torment them, Meghan replied. Your job is to inform your audience, not to create drama for ratings, but apparently those concepts are foreign to you. Look, I think you're overreacting, Andy tried, but Meghan cut him off immediately. Overreacting? Andy, you spent the entire interview trying to convince your audience that I'm a liar and a manipulator. You questioned the validity of my mental health struggles. You suggested that speaking about racism is somehow a calculated business decision. And when I finally pushed back against that character assassination, you had the audacity to tell me I was being emotional. Do you see the problem here? The studio audience was completely transfixed now. Several people had their phones out, clearly recording what was unfolding in front of them. I never called you a liar, Andy protested weakly. You didn't have to say the words directly, Meghan replied. You did it by treating my experiences like they were open for debate rather than lived realities. Andy seemed to realize that he had lost control of the interview entirely. Look, maybe we should take a break and... No, Meghan said firmly. We're not taking a break. We're finishing this right now. You wanted the real Meghan Markle. Fine, here. She is. I'm done being polite to people who treat my pain like entertainment. I'm done pretending that hostile questions deserve respectful answers. And I'm especially done with men who think they can bully me into silence and then act surprised when I refuse to be silenced. I wasn't trying to bully you, Andy said, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what would you call it? Meghan demanded. What would you call systematically questioning someone's credibility, dismissing their trauma, and then criticizing them for getting upset about it? What would you call trying to provoke someone into losing their temper, and then using that reaction. To further undermine them, Andy was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling to find a response that wouldn't make things worse for him. I actually came here with respect for you. I thought you were someone who asked tough but fair questions, I thought. You were someone who could have a real conversation about difficult topics. Instead, I found someone who seems to think that cruelty and journalism are the same thing. I'm sorry you feel that way, Andy managed, but it sounded more like a legal disclaimer than a genuine apology. I don't want your corporate apology, Meghan replied. I want you to understand something. The way you've conducted this interview tonight, the way you've treated me, says nothing about me and everything about you. Your audience is going to remember this conversation, but not for the reasons you think they will. With that, Meghan reached down and removed her microphone, the small device making a soft thud as she placed it on her chair. This interview is over, she said simply. Meghan, please, let's just, Andy started, finally seeming to realize the magnitude of what had just happened. No, Meghan said, already walking toward the edge of the set. I'm done. Your audience deserves better than this, and so do I. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his obvious discomfort. As he tried to figure out how to salvage what was clearly an irredeemable situation. We'll be right back, he finally managed to say to the camera, but his voice cracked slightly on the words. And there you have it, one of the most explosive interviews in recent television history. What do you think went too far? Andy's provocative questioning or Meghan's decision to walk out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.